So this session will be about the future of science, and as I said in the beginning, a very important thing is really to think outside of our box, and there are many different ways of looking into the world that are similar to ours in terms of using creativity, imagination, and thinking outside of our box, and also thinking about spaces, and that's why we asked an architect to be here today, which will be after. But then we also thought that this link with arts and science is very interesting from the perspective of creativity and really forcing us out of our comfort zone. And Alex Jordan, that will talk now, is a scientist by training, but has been very interested in arts, and he does an amazing work of really being at the intersection, because sometimes, you know, when people do arts and science, it's either like, okay, it's good art, but it's not that good science, or it's good science, but it's not that good art. And I think Alex is one of the few people that really does it on the intersection where the art is really providing so much more value for the science, that every time that I listen to Alex, I feel like running away from being a director and just going to art and science, because it's really so inspiring. So Alex is actually a group leader at the, let's say, Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior, and he has done many different internships in different arts places where he got to interact with many different artists, and that is influencing his science. And I think he'll talk to us about that anyway. So thank you very much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to speak, about something that has become so much more important to me as I've moved throughout my career, and something that I very much hope can encourage a novel inquiry and a novel perspective on some of the questions that we ask. And as you heard in the introduction, I myself am a scientist. I suppose in some senses, a marine biologist, maybe an evolutionary biologist. I have many collaborations actually here in Lisbon at the IGC. But today I'm not going to talk to you strictly about my science. This is not a science talk. But I want to sort of challenge and probe this idea of creativity, thinking outside the box. Because science, at its core, is a creative pursuit. Science is a process of looking at the world, of examining things, of having experiences, and creating questions, creating a problem set, creating hypotheses. Science, yes, is disciplined in its approach to replication, to scientific rigor, to examining and exploring the questions we ask in ways that are reliable, and that's certainly more and more an issue, especially in communicating to the public, that what we do is rigorous and it's not prone to conspiracy or deep state or whatever your favorite internet message board happens to be. But these things can be relied on. We don't have an agenda. Our approaches are rigorous and disciplined. But at the same time, it has to be inspired. It has to be from a place of creativity to ask the right questions, to ask questions that generate answers, that generate approaches, that give us insight into whatever phenomenon we're interested in. The fact is that the answers themselves are not up to us. They don't concern themselves with our opinions. I had a professor in Texas who said it not in quite so diplomatic words, but that science really doesn't care what you think. The answers are there, and you can create questions and you can create approaches and get to those answers. But the answers themselves are some immutable aspect of the world you're studying. And yet, in the modern age, in my experience, I'm sure in your own experiences, in your own disciplines, this idea of creativity and freedom and exploration and childish wonder at even the thing you're most interested in can be entirely swamped by the sheer volume of papers that are coming out in your exact discipline every single day, just to keep up with the review requests as a graduate student to try and get on top of everything you need to know, can reinforce this separation. It can dissuade you from creativity because every new idea has to follow exactly on from the previous one. It has to be built on a foundation, and yes, this is absolutely true. But if that comes at a cost of creativity, then science is suffering. And so I want to just talk to you today about some experiences that I've had over the past years where I have sought out the opinions, the disagreements, and sometimes the complete inability to even comprehend the words that they are using of artists. Because if we're interested in creativity, what better group of people to approach and to learn from and to understand than those who have come into that discipline because of their inherent creativity, where creativity is celebrated and encouraged. And so I'm going to take you through two examples of some projects that I've been part of, been very fortunate to be part of over the past years, and then come back to this idea about how we might think about the next 10 years or the next X years, how we could maybe encourage and incorporate some of those concepts and ideas into our science. So the first thing I'd like to discuss is this project and this concept that we explore in my lab about the relationship between structure and behavior. We look at this across taxonomic boundaries, and here I'm showing you some examples from spiders. And here we're very interested in the organization and the structure of the web itself and how it influences the behavior, the coordination, and the cooperation of those animals, in this case social spiders, that live on the web. They create the structure, but of course the structure then creates their behavior. And if this sounds very much like something Churchill once said, it absolutely is. And in trying to study this phenomenon, I was immediately met with the practical challenge of understanding such a complex three-dimensional structure, how to break it down, how to analyze it, how to measure it in a way that allows us to then ask our questions, to get to that creativity and that learning phase about the world. And we were able to track and analyze some of the aspects of the behavior and the motion and the characteristics of the web. But when it came to analyzing the structure itself, there really wasn't much out there. And this was just when I had moved to Europe, and I knew of an artist in Berlin. This artist is named Thomas Saraceno, and he does these works. This is actually some of my data combined with his work. But he has this approach in his studio, which is not a science organization, it's an art studio, where he uses laser sheet tomography to scan spider webs. So he passes a planar laser through the spider web itself, takes photographs, and then builds up these image stacks. And for anyone here involved in microscopy, this sounds very familiar. At the time, it wasn't really a method we had in spider web analysis, that grand, broad field that I'm sure you all know somebody in. Thomas wasn't using them for any scientific questions, but rather to then build these architectural scale installations, which allowed humans to interact with and experience at the level of the spider some of these structures, and to appreciate the sort of awe that might give, and even perhaps to encourage some interspecies empathy and understanding of something that I see already some people in the crowd are a bit like, it's going to get worse, I apologize. And so I approached Thomas and I said, look, I'm this scientist at the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior, and I'm really interested in your approach. Could I come to your studio and just spend some time and we chat, and maybe you solve a practical problem that I have? It was very much like the commercial dealing between art and science that so often leads to the downfall of these collaborations. And I want to be honest, that's how I started with this. But what quickly became apparent between Thomas and I is that we didn't agree on any single fact whatsoever. And we could barely sit in the room for more than 20 minutes before one of us would storm out. And that became quite interesting when Thomas invited me to spend a few weeks with him at a villa near Trieste, where we would have a sort of artist-in-residence, scientist-in-resident kind of program set up, which is also a program that I've seen implemented in many places and I think is a wonderful idea. And I want to just get more into it because at face value, this really failed. We couldn't really deal with each other very, very long. But what became so obvious to the both of us was that if we could handle that, if we could listen, if we could be in the same room, if we could talk through these ideas and concepts, it would expand those questions so dramatically that we stuck with it. And this was now 6 years ago. And since then, Thomas and I have had many shows together. We've had exhibitions in Paris, in Berlin. This one here is in New York City, where the participants are invited to walk on this suspended surface, which is equipped with, these things are seismic inducers. They're giant vibrators that people will lie down on this web. They're 15 meters in the air. This dome fills with smoke and mist. And so you're lying on this surface and you can't see anything. It just stretches to infinity. And what you experience are my spiders. You experience the collective hunt of spiders as they sense you and approach you. You feel it through the floor. You hear it through the audio tracks, and you see the projections of these spiders moving over the top of you. In another installation, it's terrifying, right? Actually, one of the major things we had to discuss in the studio was this experience lasts 7 minutes. And we had to figure out how you evacuate people who are panicking without ruining the experience for everybody else. Because, of course, any motion you make, any movement you make, contributes to the experience of everyone around you. That's actually the point. But we also had to have some contingency plans. In another version, you are wrapped up by a giant orb-weaving spider. You feel her wrapping you slowly. So I get it, it's not for everyone, yeah? The point, though, is that in those experiences, in the generation of this installation and many others similar to it, I went through a process of disbelief, displeasure, unhappiness that I wasn't being heard, unhappiness that this wasn't the right representation of the data because these species don't do this, to rather a point of imagining, what if they could? I mean, he's allowed to do that. He's allowed to imagine. He's allowed to be creative and playful and explorative. Well, why can't I? And we started to then think in the lab of all the ways we might imagine things interacting on webs. We started to explore these ideas of these energy states of animals as they interact, this seismic world that they live in. And it took our research in entirely new directions because of a man that I can barely sit in the same room with. That's actually a past situation. Thomas and I are now great friends. But the point is, through those conversations, it wasn't that he created an installation that showcased my science and that I got my name in a program somewhere. That wasn't the point. Sure, that was nice, and it's nice to go to vernissage, it's nice to go to gallery openings and have champagne. That's very nice. But this had a direct influence and a direct contribution to the process of creativity in the science that we do. And we've even gone so far as to extend it now. It touches many aspects unrelated even to the original idea, but these same concepts that originated in a villa in Trieste. I was trying to think of the state. I think it's Friuli, but then I caught myself, so I don't want to make a mistake. Anyway, near Trieste. and even caught the attention of nature itself, which ran a little feature on our work. A second thing we're really interested in the group is understanding how animals move through the world. And here we have some tracks of fish in the Mediterranean, just off the coast of Calvi in Corsica, as they move throughout these sandbanks and these Posidonia fields. And we've done a lot of work to sort of analyze and understand the natural interactions, the natural behaviors. How does this structure affect how you move and where you move? And maybe because of this, or I don't really know, while I was doing that kind of work, I got approached by an artist collective called Superflex. They're based in Copenhagen. Actually, we have an installation coming up probably here, very locally, if not more locally in Lisbon, together. But at the time, they told me that they were having this thing, deep sea minding, a desert in pink. They wanted to explore the idea of interspecies collaboration in design and architecture and structures. And they had seen the work that I had done in these kind of areas and invited me to come along. And, you know, I got to the first installation that I'd seen of theirs, and there was this behemoth thing. This is, here are humans as a dog. This is this, I don't know, 10-meter high, maybe more, massive pink structure in the middle of the desert. And their idea was, you know, what if we offered fish, aquatic animals, these human architectural structures and principles? How would they respond? Could we ask that question of fish? What do you think? What are your aesthetic preferences? What is your opinion on human design principles? And of course, I thought that was mad. Very strange thing to ask and not a rigorous scientific inquiry. But in a way, it related so exactly to the things that I was already doing, measuring the environment, measuring the motion of individuals, that I was intrigued, and I'd had this good experience already with Thomas. And so I jumped on board. And it led us down this path where we've created these sculptures here that obey certain characteristics of design, of overlap, of linearity, of the classic walls and a roof. And we've offered those up to the sea. And this now is a process that's been going for 4 years or so, where each time we offer a design up to our clients, we record their feedback. We look at how they use these structures, the motion, the places they prefer, the types of structures they avoid. And it's now really a massive research program, both in their world, in the art world, to be taking these designs and displaying them in galleries, but also in our world. This is footage taken just 2 days ago. I was in Corsica, I came here, and here we have now these fish given these varying structures, and these are iterated processes. This is somewhat of an evolutionary process of the least preferred design by a fish. And then we have 2 much more preferred designs. And the wonderful thing is, we as scientists can use the techniques we have here by tracking and analyzing patterns of motion, and then we can go back to the artists and we represent our clients and we give their feedback on your designs. Not good, more like this, more like that. The thing that I want to finish with and emphasize is that these pieces are fantastic. They're great fun. It's a wonderful experience to be part of. But it is not those pieces, it is not those installations, it is not that artwork that makes this such a productive collaboration. It is the times where we've come up from a dive and we're tired and sitting on the dock, Or it's when we're sitting on stage and we've tried to install something and it doesn't work. Or we're sitting in my lab and they're saying, we need this kind of data, and I'm saying that kind of data doesn't exist, it cannot exist, and being very scientific. It's those interstitial moments that give that inspiration, that allow that creativity to come to the fore and allow that cross-fertilization of the disciplines to improve, maybe, hopefully, their art, but so much my science. From this pink element story of these bizarre sculptures and structures we're putting in the ocean, we've now analyzed and manipulated the structure of real components in the ocean and in lakes to understand what fish want, what helps them. We can aid conservation ideas. We can even go down further thematic and theoretical scientific avenues. But it's truly a consequence of those discussions. And so if I had an idea for the next version, the next institutes, the future of those places, it would be places that don't put us in silos. We always say this. We shouldn't, as scientists, be in our ivory towers. We shouldn't be in silos and echo chambers. But how do we stop that? Forcing artists and scientists to just work together, it can generate these sort of things. This is my data, and it's actually my art. And it's terrible, because it's not the thing we should be going for. Pretty colors, data visualization. That's graphic design, and it's wonderful, and it's important as a communication tool. But the beauty of the space between art and science is not in this product. It is in those conversations and the generation of creativity in the questions we ask of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. We have time for one or two questions. Okay, I'll start. So how do you envision that institute? So if we now, you know the IGC, so what should we do at the IGC to make it so that every day people arrive and feel free to have new ideas and stimulated to have new ideas?
Yeah, it's not what the funding agencies want to hear, and it's not easily producible, and I think that's the greatest challenge we face, because there should not be a view to a production. I was reading this piece just a few days ago that art should be allowed to be useless. It shouldn't have this requirement. And so I think that's the first barrier, I think, in these kind of collaborations, is that an artist comes in to the Gulbenkian, to our institute, wherever they come in, and they feel compelled to produce something that makes their stay worthwhile for them, maybe, but also for their host. What can I give to these places? And you know, when I tell the story of Thomas, yes, I sort of exaggerate the interpersonal stuff, but he didn't need me and I didn't need him, and that was beautiful. Because we played in this space. And these are two collaborations that worked, but there have been 10 that didn't. And not in a bad way, it's just that there wasn't that interpersonal spark. And that's the thing that I think needs to be captured. The space that allows, it doesn't need to be an artist and a scientist. It can be, of course, any transdisciplinary thing. But let's say it's an artist and a scientist. To take away the pressure and just allow them to talk about a concept. So perhaps it shouldn't be that you have an artist in residence that is going to produce some exhibition at the end of it, but rather you have focal groups around an idea. And that idea can be approached by many people in many different ways. And then if you can get those people in the same room, the challenge is to get them to understand one another. And that's a big challenge, and it takes time. But I think that should be the focus, that you come together around a concept. What are you interested in? I don't care what you produce at the end of it, but what's the thing that makes you sit down at a table together and talk and challenge each other?
I guess time is one of the most important assets there, to have time without pressure.
That's where the economics don't help.
Thank you very much. I mean, I understand that data visualization can be nice.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I love my data when I see them. I mean, no matter
Ah.
what. But my question is, I mean, you work together, that is remarkable with the innovative artists, if I understand. Do you think that there are common mechanisms underlying the job of being innovative? Because the guy was working on totally different frontiers, I guess. For you, innovation remains a way of generating new ideas which may allow you to progress. But there are common mechanisms between the two?
Yeah. You know, in this, I'm always so tempted to sort of quote Da Vinci or Plato's Academy, where art and science weren't different. But this is not true. Da Vinci, well, I don't stand here in the Gulbenkian and talk about Da Vinci, but he was an artist who was interested in scientific methods, probably to improve his art. Nevertheless, even though art and science are different endpoints, I think for so much of the road, it's the common road. You look at the world and you want to understand something about the world, and you want to represent that understanding, or you want to challenge an opinion. My work looking at consciousness in animals is trying to challenge opinions and be provocative. And I think in those senses, they are the same approach. But then I think the requirements of the two disciplines ultimately make them diverge, and that's fine. That's great, because one has to be objective and one has to be subjective, I suppose, in a sense. But for so much of it, maybe it's a dirty word, but subjectivity in science, I think, is important. This is what I think is happening in the world. Okay, and now I take off that hat and I put on my objective hat and I test whether that's true. And if it's not true, hopefully we can let go of it.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Pleasure.